because to do a live public broadcast is just unbelievably easy. The difficult part, Rajiv, is to build an audience and get it out there, and to do the sort of paid advertising. So I've started a strategy of doing some paid advertising across the various platforms, and I'm assessing which one is gives me the better return. I've tried LinkedIn for the last week or so, and I don't think I've got the same return. So I'm going to have a crack at the Facebook stuff and the Google stuff and see how it links in. Okay, it should have just popped up on your screen that we are live.
I did see that momentarily.
Great, good. All right. Okay, so so we're out there. So hi everyone. Welcome to another chat with one of my very close business colleagues. And today we're very lucky we've got Rajiv on board. Now, Rajiv and I have known each other for a long time, and he specialises in business broking in Australia. I'll let Rajiv do his own introduction in a second. But I think his particular expertise is anything around buying or selling a business, particularly in the current climate, if you like, what you need to look out for, how things are progressing, how we're going to come out of this in the next 3 to 6 months. And also Rajiv has a particular expertise with any of the franchises. And being on the immigration side, a lot of our clients come to Australia and they invest in franchises, whether it's one of the bigger ones or the smaller coffee franchises, whichever. And that's you need some fairly careful advice around that when you look at these things. And Rajiv is definitely the person to talk to. So Rajiv, welcome. How are you?
Good morning, Dan. Thank you very much for inviting me.
For everyone that hasn't met you before, do you want to just give us a quick background about yourself and what you do and what your business is?
Sure, yes, Dan. I run a small business brokerage based here in Perth. I have been a business broker since 2011. I spent a lot of time working with franchise brands when I first started, so 5 or 6 years selling franchise businesses in WA. And over the last few years, because the market's changed so dramatically, I work on both independent and franchise sector businesses, predominantly helping vendors and buyers. Most of my buyers tend to be first-time buyers, but as time in the industry's gone on, I'm starting to see the second wave, relatives, friends, sons, daughters, etc., coming through now looking for their first venture. Yeah. And obviously, like you, I've seen the ups and the downs of the economy here in WA. Yeah,
well, that's the life of a business owner. It goes up and it goes down. What are we going to do?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I know, Rajiv, a lot of people come to us and they're potential investors or business owners, and they actually don't know what sort of business to get into in Australia. I mean, in the past, we've had people who, they've been from South Africa or they've been from Bangladesh or from Malaysia, Singapore, and they just, they just want to get a visa. They're a business owner, yes. And they sort of say, well, listen, just get me a business. And I'm very lucky because I just give it to you. Yes. How do you approach that sort of scenario? Because it's becoming more and more popular. They actually don't know what business to get into in Australia.
Yeah, look, my approach is possibly no different to yours when you meet clients for the first time. I spend a substantial amount of time just trying to understand their experience, their background, their budget, and most importantly for me, their transferable skills, because not every business is suitable to every buyer. A lot of buyers are particularly entrepreneurial. They've run businesses in their home countries. They bring a certain approach. If I was to try and shoehorn one of those individuals into a franchise business, which is driven by following systems, processes, and protocol, there necessarily isn't a fit. I have clients who sometimes say, look, I want a coffee shop. And I spend a little bit of time saying, well, why do you want a coffee shop? Well, because I want to work between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday, and I want the weekends off. Well, a coffee shop's not the business for you. I can very quickly talk you out of that. Or I have others who say, look, I want a McDonald's and I've got $250,000. That would just about get you through the first year of living costs as you spend a year training in buying a Macca's. So I just try and, I guess a little bit like an onion, I try and peel off the first few layers and get down to the crux of what the motivation is and which business would suit them. And I think generally when people arrive here, a franchise system sometimes is suitable because they want to be in business for themselves, but not by themselves. It's a hackneyed old phrase, but you have a franchisor support system behind you. Sometimes that can work. Others have run supermarkets or service stations in their home countries. Well, it's not a shoehorn into a service station business or a supermarket here, but there's a lot of similarities and a lot of skills that are transferable. So the more time I get, the more of an understanding I have of a client and their drivers, the more able and equipped I am to find a business that would suit them.
Do you notice any difference between a potential migrant that's coming from, let's say, Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, compared to maybe a UK business migrant, compared to maybe a South African business migrant? And they're sort of the main regions where we talk about sort of business migration. Those clients, how are they interested in different businesses, different sectors? What are you seeing?
They can be. I've dealt with a number of buyers from the UK, from Western European countries. I guess there's more of a close alignment because there's almost an immediate cultural fit with dealing with Aussie customers and dealing with Aussie suppliers and dealing with the Australian environment as a whole. And I think people from other countries where culturally there are differences and perhaps linguistically there are differences, there can be more of a challenge. And you do have to spend a little bit more time and care in identifying what might be suitable. If I have a client who struggles with English as a first language, putting them into a customer-focused or a customer-facing business inherently disables them from the outset. Generally there's pressure to buy a business, sometimes for a visa and sometimes because they need to earn an income almost immediately. Again, I say to clients, look, please stop emailing me about these businesses. Pick up the phone, let's talk, let's meet, and give me as much of a picture as you can of yourself so that I can really help you to nail down the opportunities that are right for you. There is, I guess, in some cultures, a reluctance to get into a face-to-face meeting with someone you don't know at the off. I get multiple inquiries from somebody, about 10 different businesses, one that's priced at 250,000 and one that's priced at 5 million. And I think, well, there's a disjoint here. Somebody doesn't understand what they're looking for. They're entirely different types of businesses. So the more time and understanding I can get, the better equipped I am to help them. Look, cultural differences aside, sometimes if it's a franchise business, the franchisor obviously holds the veto on who buys a franchise and who doesn't. All franchise sales are always subject to franchisor approval. So part of my role, again, is to vet that individual before sending them forward for a franchisor interview or a franchisor assessment process. I guess the common understanding is, oh, well, I've got a checkbook, I can buy a franchise. It's not so simple. And I go back to when you and I met 2011, 12. In those days, Subway had a 4-step recruitment process. You had an online application, a telephone interview, a psychometric assessment center, and time in store, and then a final interview with their general manager before you could get into a store or get onto a waiting list. So it's not as easy as wave a checkbook and in you go, you've got a business for yourself. You really need to do some homework. You need to do some research and prepare yourself to get into business here. Yeah.
One of the things, Rajiv, when we've worked on clients together, is that the lead time to get into a business, franchise or not, is quite significant. And you're talking about somebody who's coming in from overseas. And then the issue that they always have in Australia is getting work rights. And unfortunately, I tend to throw a bit of a dampener on the party by saying, well, listen, I'm sorry, but you don't have work rights, which means you can't work in Australia. Whereas on the other hand, they're talking to you and they're wanting to get into this business as quickly as possible. And the two sort of clash. But maybe the time frame for getting into a business in Australia can be quite long. And during that time, we have to make sure that they've got sufficient work rights rather than just being on a business visitor visa. So what sort of time frame should they be looking at?
I think 3 to 6 months. If it's an independent business, there isn't a vetting process per se to go through. As long as you have the rights to own a business and the right to work in a business, 3 months is probably reasonable for an independent business. If you're buying a franchise, you have to take variable factors into consideration: the time it takes to have the lease assigned to your name, the time it takes to complete your training before you can be in store. And I'll give you an example. If you're buying a Dome Cafe, you could spend up to 4 weeks training at the head office, plus another 4 or 5 weeks in store. If you're buying a Baker's Delight, 16 weeks training on the Gold Coast before you can come back and store.
16 weeks.
The
That's
delays are
that's 4
mostly
months.
procedural. Yes. 16 weeks, you'd be qualified as a baker before you'd be allowed anywhere near one of their stores. Well, look, it reduces the risk of you failing in your business, and for the franchisor, it gives them the assurance that your product in your store will be as good as the Baker's Delight down the road. So it protects their brand, but it also ensures that you as the operator are equipped to run that business.
Wow, that's interesting. Is there
Yes.
now at what point are they actually working in that business? Because the process with you starts off with probably lots of business meetings, which under most visitor visas are fine. But as soon as they hit that thing where they're actually working in the business, then it becomes a problem. At what point do they start actually working in the business, Rajiv?
Look, again, there's a difference between an independent business. Generally, there's a short handover period. I've sold independent supermarkets where the handover has been a couple of weeks, working hand in hand with the current owner, with the incumbent owner, followed by the incumbent owner then being available to you on the phone for a couple of months. In a franchise business, slightly different. You cannot be in store and operating that business until you have successfully completed the franchisor's training program. And the lease is in your name. So you are, for all intents and purposes, the owner of the business, the approved franchisee, and you are trained to operate. With a franchise business, quite often there is somebody, either a local business development manager or somebody from head office, who will come and spend the first week or the first 10 days working with you in store, just to ensure that the things that you've learned on the training program, you're able to apply capably in store, whether it's production, display, whatever it might be. Most buyers are keen to get the deal done in 4 weeks and to be in store. Generally, that's just not feasible. It doesn't happen in our climate here in Australia. There is a legal process to go through. There is a number of steps there are a number of steps to complete before you take over the store and start operating.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the advantage when we work together, and also with some of our accounting colleagues as well, that we're able to coordinate what's required at each end, because it is, particularly with the business visas, there's a lot of different moving parts at your end, if they're buying a business, whatever they're getting into, at the accounting side, and also trying to manage the visa and the work rights. There's lots of moving pieces. So, Rajiv, just to jump into what's going on at the moment, I imagine that if somebody is cashed up, they're offshore, they've been wanting to come to Australia for a while, I think they're looking at it and they're like seagulls with chips. They're probably thinking, right, where are the bargains? I'm gonna buy a string of hairdressing salons, or I'm going to buy a string of nail salons, because let's face it, they're all in trouble. And if you've got a little bit of cash and you're coming in from offshore, you're going to pick up a bargain. Is that your thinking? What are you seeing out there?
Look, if I give you some basic numbers, and these aren't anecdotal, these are fact-check figures. So at the moment, if you go via Seek as a business sale website alone, Seek Commercial, there are approximately 14,000 businesses for sale across Australia. And that's not taking into account the businesses that are being sold privately, the businesses that are being sold by accountants and business brokers that aren't listed on Seek. So let's just say there are 15,000 businesses for sale. WA per se has about 600 or 700 of those. The rest are spread between Victoria, New South Wales, and the other larger states. So there is, for business buyers, an embarrassment of riches when it comes to what do I pick, what do I buy. The real opportunity here is for somebody who is prepared, has taken paid professional advice from a commercially minded accountant, from a migration lawyer about their ability to apply for a visa to come and live in Australia, and then to speak to somebody like me, somebody who is dealing with business sellers day in, day out, and has a short list of businesses that we can then assess against the buyer's needs. What's your investment budget? What kind of return are you looking for? Do you plan to run the business yourself, or do you plan to run the business under management? These are all the specifics. There is no shortage of available businesses, and there are no shortages when it comes to profitable business that are available today. We've got the whole baby boomers retiring. We've got those who are in financial distress because of COVID-19, and we've got those who are just ready for a change, want to make a lifestyle change, perhaps just take a break, take a year or two out, and they've got a successful business that they've built up over 5, 6, 10 years perhaps, and are ready to make a move. But it really comes down to how well prepared the buyer is and how equipped they are with advisors to make a move.
So, but there are some bargains out there. There would have to be in the current environment. If you're cashed up, coming from offshore, then
Yes.
hmm.
Yes, there are. Look, there are, I guess, two types of business. There are those who are in financial distress because of the COVID-19 closures and restrictions, and there are those who are thriving in this environment because they're the only ones who remain open amongst their competitors. They've perhaps got a little bit of cash in the bank, or they've got a strong reputation, or they've adapted their business model to work around the current restrictions. You see a number of cafes if you walk down the CBD now that are closed, and you see others who've actually just shut off their seating area, opened the hatch in the window, reduced their menus, and they will just work on the basis that they can hit a couple of $1,000s a day in sales by just focusing on coffee and takeaway food.
Yeah.
And those kind of businesses remain viable. They've reduced their outgoings, they've negotiated on their rents, and they're still making money.
Yeah, you've got to be nimble. You've got to be able to,
You have to be very adaptable to these circumstances.
Rajiv, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is that they're looking, particularly from Southeast Asia and Chinese type investors or business owners, they like businesses that are involved in property because they see property as a very safe investment. And are there a lot of businesses out there that are property related, where it's buying and selling property or in that property market?
Look, in terms of established businesses that deal with rent rolls or deal as perhaps work as a real estate agent, you don't see successful rent rolls very often go outside of the real estate industry. So generally, if you have a rent roll of, let's say, 5,000 properties and you're looking to exit your business, I, as your neighbouring real estate agent, would very quickly be in talks with you to acquire that. So generally, the market constricts but expands because existing players are expanding their foothold. The limitations to entry into that kind of market are your network, your contact list, and your experience of running that kind of business successfully somewhere else here in Australia. And obviously, you need to have a license to get into that game. Now, if you're a builder or a developer, well, that's something that you can run independently. If you've got the funds to deposit and the ability to buy land or buildings and to develop those, you can do that independently. I generally perhaps deal with 1 or 2 rent rolls a year. More often than not, they sell within their existing networks.
Yeah, that's what any real estate agent I've ever spoken to has always talked about, trying to build that rent roll. That's what they're
absolutely
trying to get it bigger and bigger. Yeah, okay. Is there anything in the apartment sector that, because that's the other sort of hot topic, I suppose, is anything around apartments, managing, buying several of them, anything like that?
Look, I don't deal with those, Dan. There are, I think, specialist agencies that would deal with those. It's just not an area of expertise for me. Again, I think there are key players that have worked successfully for many years in that field.
Yep. Okay. Well, Rajiv, what we're going to be putting out in our immigration news is the time frame, because everyone knows we've got travel bans on. Probably going to go for another 3 or 4 months. We still are doing exemptions. People are still coming and going. Essential workers, compassionate circumstances, a whole range of things, returning Australians. But anyone that is in this prospective business migrant application process, they're looking at a minimum time frame of 6 to 12 months in any case. So even if we came across somebody today, we would introduce them tomorrow. They would take 3, 4, 5, 6 months to talk to you. At the same time, they'd take at least 6 months to prepare their documentation. So anyone who is looking to come to Australia in 2021, 2022, really needs to start now. And now is a great time to be looking around for businesses. Because if they leave it another 6 months and the recovery starts to come through, and there's so much government money that's being thrown at it at the moment, then they're going to be on the upswing. So maybe they won't get as many bargains as they would now. What do you think, Rajiv?
I think the market will go through some changes. I think 2019 started out as a year where we had a number of macroeconomic events in Australia. We had the US-China standoff, we had Brexit, we had the civil unrest in Hong Kong. Locally, we had flood, we had fire, we had droughts. So it was a challenging year to start with. And I think we've seen sort of a cascade of businesses coming onto market, primarily through financial hardships. But we've also seen a number of new entrants who have been looking for some time and then thought perhaps this was the right time. None of us could have predicted what happened with COVID-19, and I think it will take a little while for the economy to reach whatever our new normal is. In the meantime, there are still some very solid opportunities. I've got a couple of vendor clients who are out in regional WA. They run auto mechanical repair businesses. One who I spoke with on Monday is 31% up on this time last year. That's not a month-on-month comparison, that's a quarter-on-quarter comparison. Because for him up in the regions, the mining companies are working away. People don't have the option of going out and doing 20 other social activities, so they're investing in getting their cars up to speed. They're buying new tires. They're updating their vehicles. So he's making money. For a buyer, some very attractive prospects out there because the pricing has also adjusted to reflect what's going on. Market value today for a profitable business may not be comparable with market value 6 months or 12 months ago. There are enough opportunities out there for somebody who's equipped to invest in a business today.
So Rajiv, you will act as the buyer's agent as well as the vendor's agent.
Yes, I'm licensed to do both, Dan. I'm licensed to do both. I'd say 95% of my work is to act on behalf of the seller. 5% of my work is to act on behalf of the buyer. So each year, I probably do 2 or 3 buyer's agent type deals where I act for the buyer. I look at a number of opportunities. I present them with a profile on each of those business opportunities, and then work with the buyer and their accountant to decide which one fits their requirements, and work with the migration agent in your case to decide which one meets their visa criteria.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right.
The process isn't quick, Dan, as you said earlier. It can take 3 to 6 months at least.
Oh, absolutely. I think if, Raj, if anyone decides they start a conversation with you now, they're really looking at migrating in 2021. That's not going to happen any earlier. And to be honest, even though we've got COVID-19, that's not a whole lot different from a normal market in any case, apart from the fact that valuations are completely different. And I think the standard way, there's your standard accounting valuations for a lot of the businesses. I mean, Rajiv, you're the expert. Surely they wouldn't apply in the current environment, would they?
Yeah, they don't. I think the criteria has changed. Predominantly buyers and their advisors today would look at future maintainable earnings from a business and also the risk profile of that business. Now, those 2 factors combined give me, as a business broker, a market valuation on that business. That sometimes is entirely different to an accountant's valuation of a business, which is based on their assets and their turnover and their previous performance. Market value generally reflects what's happening in the marketplace today. And that's the basis on which I'm pricing businesses before putting them onto market. How safe are they in the current environment, and what can a buyer expect reasonably to earn year on year for the next 2 or 3 years?
Okay. Rajiv, I know you're based in Perth. For our Sydney clients, our Melbourne clients, can you help them out as well?
Look, I'm not licensed in those states. However, I work as part of a network. So I have clients that work very closely with me who are also business brokers, colleagues who work closely with me who are business brokers in those states. So whether you're looking in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Brisbane, Northern Territory, in Darwin or in Adelaide, absolutely, I'm happy to connect you with my colleagues, my network partners in those states.
Cool. Okay. All right, man. That's awesome. And I know you've got a client coming through shortly, so we might wrap it up there. I'll turn off the YouTube, but I just want to say thank you very much for your time. I think that's really useful information. And it's good that we've been able to have this chat because it ties up a lot of the queries that I get very early in the piece when potential business migrants get in touch with me. And then they immediately want to start talking about businesses and business brokers and how the process works. And I just think in the last 15 minutes, we've really tied it up really neatly.
Thanks very much for the invitation to join in this discussion, Dan.
All right, I'm just going to turn it off the public thing. All right, so let's see.